Free audio post-production by alphonic.com.
Captain's Log.
Han Solo. I'm Captain of the Millennium Falcon.
This is Captain Jean-Luc Picard of the Federation starship Enterprise.
Priority 1 message from Starfleet coming in on secured channel.
You're listening to Captains Logs and Lightsabers.
Hey, Feast of Fandoms fam, this is Jonathan. I am the host of Captains Logs and Lightsabers podcast, which you are listening to right now. I want you to, this is episode 42, and as always, I wouldn't be able to host this show without my co-host, and that's Chris. So, hey, how you doing, Chris?
I'm doing well, Jonathan. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. It's
all right.
It's time for our monthly episode, and you know, we've actually been pretty consistent here. This is the second month in a row where we've recorded an episode, which has not happened in a very long time.
Oh, I'm hoping summer's helping with that a little bit, you know.
It is. Yeah. I definitely have a little more availability, and I don't go to bed as early because I get to work from home a lot of days.
Absolutely.
Over the summer, so.
Absolutely. Just so you know, you're going to see me scratching. Jonathan, I'm talking to you specifically. Yeah. You're going to be seeing me scratching my arms throughout the session. I have an allergy to the grass. Now, I was just out cutting grass, so my arms are kind of on fire right now. Being itchy. So I'm not being weird or anything. I just wanted you to know that.
Yeah. No, you're good. You're good. For our listening audience, we don't record video along with the audio, but sometimes Chris and I will just be able to see each other while we're recording. So just to get each other's reactions and stuff. Mm-hmm. We've tried recording video in the past, but it's always been like technical issues always pop up, and either the video stutters or the audio skips or something. It's just, it's never worked out, but that's why we're still an audio only podcast. But hey,
anyway. Always we can expand in the future, possibly.
Possibly. Yep, for sure. So I know there's not a whole lot going on news-wise, but before we get into the limited bit of information you got for us, Chris, let's talk about our episode feature, Fandom Frontier. That's where we get to talk about something we do outside of our love for Star Trek and Star Wars. Sometimes that involves going to conventions, going thrift store shopping, or going to, stuff like that. So, Chris, what is your Fandom Frontier for us this time?
Oh, so a couple little things here. So on June 7th and 8th, I went with my Star Trek club, the USS Stella Parada. We had a recruitment table at Three Rivers Comic-Con in Pittsburgh. And we had a game, so we were raising money for it's not the ship's charity, it's the convention's charity, called Extra Life. And last year we earned $371. This year we actually did 522, I think, or 542. Nice. 542 is what it was. So we really lucked out. A little shout out to the USS Ranger out in Ohio in Region 1. They actually came and brought Star Trek figures and Doctor Who figures to help sell as well. And that money was donated to the charity as well.
Oh, that's incredible.
So hopefully it'll be a little bit of help there for pediatric research and getting the kids some video games to use while they're in the hospital.
That's fantastic. That's a great charity to support, man.
Absolutely. That's wonderful. And then I've been buying some doodads. I showed you off screen, but this new phaser. I can't remember what this is from. It says Ruby's Costume Company, so I don't know if that's like a good quality product or what. But it's copyrighted 2018. So it doesn't light up, but it makes good noises. And I'm always a big fan of old Star Trek books. And I went to Half Price Books in Monroeville, what was it, 3 days ago? And I found this old Star Trek The Motion Picture book I've only seen in pictures. It's called Make Your Own Costume Book. It came out in 1979 with the movie, so it's pretty neat.
Nice.
Yeah, found something like that. And then I'm trying to think. Well, next week, which will be Friday, July 11th through the 13th, will be Shore Leave 45, the Star Trek convention. It's in Lancaster, so my wife and I are heading out there next week. Actually, she was getting our hotel room booked right before you and I hooked up here to do this today. You know,
Nice.
So, but yeah, that's pretty much how I've been nerding out. How about yourself?
Yeah. Oh, I know I can't remember if we talked on the show or if we talked offline about your trip out there to Shore Leave in Lancaster. Where are you guys staying? Or did you end up sticking with the hotel, or did you find a bed and breakfast?
We're not staying there, and we're not doing a bed and breakfast. To be honest with you, I don't know where we're staying yet. I don't know if she found a hotel or if we're going to sleep in our car or under a bush. You know? She'll just have to let me know. She's very selective about that stuff. She's been looking for weeks. I'm like, just do the Red Roof Inn because I get a discount with my Starfleet International membership. So
that's cool.
She was looking for the cheapest she could find all the way around. So now I'm like, crunch time. You know, we got to get this booked. You know, but so I don't know where we're staying, but we've been looking around. She really wants to see some of the Amish stuff that's going on. And there's a smorgasbord that we found out is out there. I can't remember the name of it. Something with maple in it. But anyway,
Shady Maple?
Shady Maple. That's it. That's it.
It's the world's largest buffet, I believe.
I think so. And so I'm ready to break my diet for this. I've been on a diet for 7 weeks and I've lost 18 pounds.
Congratulations, man.
Thank you. But after what I saw in the pictures of the food, I might actually break my diet that weekend. Why not? You know, you can always get back on.
Yeah,
you know?
I've never been to Shady Maple. But when Kylie and I go to Lancaster, because we'll go to a lot of the little Amish shops, and we'll go to a local restaurant that has it's not a massive buffet. It's very small. They have like 2 hot tables, a pie case, and a dessert table, and a salad bar table. It's called Diener's. It's a local place. It's on Route 30 on US 30, like right outside of Lancaster. It's not far at all, and it's next to this really cool store called the Dutch Wonderland. They have like Amish made furnitures and like chairs and like curio cabinets and everything you can think of. They have food and all kinds of cool stuff, and it's like a windmill shaped building. It's pretty neat.
Oh wow. Okay.
But, yeah. Just stick on 30, and the place is called Diener's. If you're going from Lancaster from Lancaster on 30, Diener's will be on your left, and so that's where the Dutch Wonderland is too.
Oh, nice. Thank you for letting me know that. We'll check it out.
Man. Yeah, and then if you get time to drive around and go to some of the little Amish towns, there's a fantastic bakery in Bird in Hand. It's called the Bird in Hand Bake Shop.
Okay. Sounds good.
There's a cute little roadside stand. I think it's called like Roadside Stand in the Google Maps.
Easy to remember.
Yeah. They have like Amish recipe soft pretzels that are like a third of the price of Auntie Anne's and just as good.
Nice.
They have like handmade Afghans and stuff like that. They have all kinds of stuff there. But it's called Roadside Stand, I think.
Cool. I think that's great. I'll check it out. Anything we can do, because we're not going to stay at stay at the convention the whole time, because Brandy's not a Trekkie like I am. So going to try to mix it up a little bit. So thank you for all the help with what's going on out there. We can't wait.
Of course. Good. I'm excited because you've never been out there, huh?
Not once.
Yeah.
Nope.
Yeah. Kylie and I went on both our first anniversary and our second anniversary, stayed at the same bed and breakfast both times.
Nice.
In Lancaster. And then we don't even go out there to stay. We'll just go, I'll drive 3 hours. We'll shop and eat for 3 hours and then head home for 3 hours.
There you go. Perfect.
It's a really long day trip.
It's a long day trip, but hey, if you got the time, do it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yep.
So good. So what about you? What have you been up to?
Well, let's see. I was able to represent our little podcast on one of the other Feast of Fandoms projects that we have, and that it's a little game show that Garrett, the host of War of the Stars, conceptualized called Fandom Frenzy, and it kind of follows Jeopardy rules, and I got to represent our show, and that video is on our YouTube channel now, so make sure you go check it out, and you can see see who won, and and see, play along too and see if you know the answers to the questions.
It's good.
Yeah, man. It was a fun opportunity. I don't know if I've ever really talked about how much of a trivia junkie I am. So this was always right up my alley.
Well, that's great. I'm glad you're representing us then, because beyond Star Trek, I don't think I could do, we would fail if I was representing.
And then It's not something I've done yet. However, it is something that I recently bought tickets for. I was lucky enough to get picked in the lottery to buy tickets to see the Savannah Bananas when they come to Pittsburgh in
Nice.
August.
Mm-hmm. That's really
They're
cool.
doing like a stadium tour, so they're going to be playing 2 games at PNC Park. And if you've never seen them, go check out like YouTube or Instagram and look up the Savannah Bananas. It's baseball with a twist.
Okay. Sounds good. Well, that's great.
So that's in late August. So I'm really excited to go see that because there's some wild stuff that happens at Bananas games.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's awesome. Definitely. I'll check out. You said the videos were on YouTube?
YouTube, any other social media, you can find them on Facebook, Instagram, anywhere.
Oh, okay. Cool. Awesome.
Yeah. So yeah, that was my that's basically what I've done recently for my Fandom Frontier. On that note, do you want to move on and talk about a little bit of news?
Absolutely.
All right, let's go.
All right. So, like Jonathan was saying earlier, there hasn't been a lot of Star Trek or Star Wars news lately, but we know that Strange New Worlds will be on Paramount Plus Season 3 starting on July 17th. Typical 10 episodes. We know that Season 4 is getting ready to start production, and it was just announced that Season 5 would actually be the final season of Strange New Worlds, but it's only going to be 6 episodes this time. I'm not quite sure why. I don't know if that has anything to do with that Paramount Skydance kind of thing going on or what. Yeah. But anyway, yeah. So it's good, but it's going to be 6 episodes, and a lot of fans are kind of wondering, what's going to happen here? Is it how Strange New World's going to end? And most people are thinking that it's going to kind of lead right into the original series, which would make sense about maybe Pike turning the keys of the Enterprise over to Kirk. And they have so many of the original series characters recast now. I think the only ones they haven't really showed yet are McCoy, Sulu, and Chekhov as of yet. But
yeah.
There was an interview, I read it on trekmovie.com. It was with Akiva Goldsman and Henry Alonzo Myers. They're executive producers of Strange New Worlds. And basically, they were kind of asked about the ending. And they said, one of them said something that seemed very, like it got a lot of fans talking online. So basically what they're saying is that, well, Akiva Goldsman says here, quote, and then we run into TOS. And then in parentheses, it says switching to conspiratorial tone, but they're not dying. And we have those sets. So a lot of fans are out there now thinking that there's a chance they might reboot the original series. And me being a Star Trek mostly purist as best as I can, I have 2 feelings about this. First of all, I don't want them to do it because basically what they're saying is TOS doesn't matter anymore. And for a show that started all of Star Trek, for people 60 years later to say, oh, the original series, we could do it a whole lot better. We got all these great sets. We got young actors ready to go. We can retell these stories, tell other new stories. To me, that's BS because, in my opinion, what that shows is disrespect for what came before. They don't never say this about Next Generation or Deep Space Nine, Voyager, any of them. None of them are ever saying that it's outdated. The original series is constantly getting bashed by a lot of the newer people, from what I'm hearing. And to do that, to say, what, Shatner, Nimoy, DeForest Kelly, all of them, everybody who acted on the show, wrote for the show, did sets for the show, everything, models. Your stuff's not good enough anymore. We're going to do better, and that's going to replace your show, but we'll keep everything else in the Star Trek universe. To me, is arrogant. I think it's disrespectful to the people who have come and worked so hard. If it weren't for all those people 60 years ago, we wouldn't have what we have now. So that's just my opinion on that. Now, there's another part of me that says, you know what? Go ahead, let them reboot the original series. Because in my opinion, that would show, okay, Discovery, Strange New Worlds, and the reboot would all be in an alternate timeline, because you can't have all the other Star Treks without the original series. All the other shows reference the old look, the old stories, everything from the original series. So it would have to be its own separate thing. But I know a lot of other people have different opinions. You, I think, have a different opinion. Feel free.
I think the important thing to remember is this is just rumor, speculation, and
right.
This is just what the internet is interpreting somebody's words in an interview to be. And we know that is not always the best way. That is definitely not the best way to to report journalism. Anybody that uses something like that is trying to get, it's a clickbait article, right?
Absolutely. You're right.
So, you have to take what the internet says with a grain of salt, and, people tend to extrapolate way too much out of what they hear. So take this with a healthy grain of salt, anything that Chris and I say about this. But my thinking was that you can't, is there a way to respectfully carry on the mission that was started with the original series? For example, while technically the Star Trek the Animated Series from the 1970s is supposed to be the remaining 2 years of the original series mission, 5-year mission, they had the realm of animation to really explore a lot of different ideas and different ways of telling stories than what you could in traditional live action television. But couldn't you essentially thread whatever, if you were to take the new cast, right? Paul Wesley, Ethan Peck, Celia Rose Gooding, and I do not know the actor that they cast in Scotty's role. If you took them out of Strange New Worlds and basically put them in, the next 2 years or the last 2 years of the original Enterprise's mission, you could thread those new stories in with what already occurred in the animated series, right? So you could still respect what came before it while telling new stories and finishing out that 5-year mission.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely think you could do that without a doubt. I guess my point at this point now is, can we please stop with the prequels? Can we please stop with mining the original series? Can we move forward, please? Yeah. Even if it's not Star Trek Legacy, can we have something in the 26th century maybe? That's an area that hasn't been touched at all. Right. Have a new ship, whether it's the Enterprise or Star Trek Pioneer or whatever, and go out and be what Star Trek is, going out and exploring space. It can give little nods back to what's come before or even future wise, but it would basically be untouched and they wouldn't have to worry so much about canon, just that. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I just wanted to clarify something that you had said, with if they were to reboot the whole original series and use that to overwrite what came before it, that would be equivalent to rebooting the original trilogy, right? The original Star Wars trilogy.
Yep.
And I don't think I'd want that to happen in either franchise, Stories can exist that build upon what we saw, but they don't have to replace.
I agree with you 100%. 100%. I mean, if there was a way they could respectfully, like you said, maybe weave something, that's fine. But again, like you said, this is all. I mean, I just reread the title of the article I found, and it's a clickbait. And at the end of the article says, "Suggest continuing with new TOS show," and just from that one little Akiva Goldsman quote.
Yeah, right, exactly.
But I guess it's fandom, and no matter what fandom you are, you're going to see something and you want to run with it because it's human nature to like drama and have something to focus on, So,
what would be kind of cool if some of the writers from Lower Decks, because of how reverent they are to things in the series, because of all the little Easter eggs and the references they make to things that have happened in Trek, I think that would be, having those writers come on board for whatever TOS reboot or continuation they could do, because those guys, those writers, are good at weaving in little things. They could put in all kinds of slick references to like animated series episodes,
I would agree with that.
They could refer back to, something that happened in an episode of TOS.
Or they could even try.
Sorry, TAS.
Right. Or they could even try to get Terry Metalis back to try to do something like that. I don't know if there are any bridges burnt that area or not, but they could always entice somebody back. You never know.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there are ways where you can. I think there are ways where you can do something that respects TOS while continuing the stories. I mean, and what's to say, you don't have to have each season be 1 year in the 5-year mission, right?
Right.
I mean, using things like cliffhangers, right? You can use a cliffhanger in between seasons where that way that it's just a direct continuation of what came before.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So you can play with the timeline in that way, and you could have a 5-season show that only takes place over 2 years, 2 Starfleet years.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're right. A lot of the newer shows, I don't think they do it in like a year, once a year. Each season was a whole year.
Exactly.
It's so different now. Yeah.
Yeah, you don't really have a lot of annualized television shows anymore, especially in streaming. The world of streaming. I mean, traditional television, you still have yearly seasons of like Law and Order SVU and the original Law and Order they brought back. I'm trying to think what other you've got shows on all those the big 4 networks, right, that come back every single year.
Yep.
So it still exists. It's just not really common in the streaming world.
Exactly. It's just a whole new genre. I always keep wondering if eventually, like Data said in the episode The Neutral Zone, that television didn't last beyond the year 2040. So, and now we got streaming that's really taking over cable and even network. So who knows in the next 15 years if some sort of odd prophecy kind of comes true,
I mean, I think that, Star Trek is a little bit behind on The Simpsons in predicting real world events.
Agreed. But they predicted tech.
Yeah, very true. I mean, who'd have thought, tablets, when seeing data pads for the first time, and then, now we have tablets.
Absolutely. Earpieces.
Yep.
Like AirPods.
Well, just the original cell phone, the flip phone design was based on the communicator. So
absolutely. I don't think we have any handheld scanners yet. I'm not sure about that, but like tricorders.
I want to say that they have a very early concept of something that's similar to a tricorder, but it's very limited use, right? It can't scan everything, but I think they have like some sort of basic like medical tricorder.
Okay. Well, they do have the. Remember in the original series, the bio beds, the screen behind, those are commonplace now.
Yeah. Yeah, very true. So that was a fun little discussion about what could potentially occur after Strange New Worlds wraps up.
Absolutely. We just can't get our panties in a wad. We just gotta wait and see what happens.
Exactly. Nothing is official until it's official.
Exactly.
Don't get technical with me.
Logic is the beginning of wisdom, Valeris, not the end.
The Jedi uses the Force for knowledge and defense.
All right, so I think on that note, we are going to go transition to our feature discussion for this episode. And I don't think I gave a teaser at the top of the episode what we're talking about. So we are carrying on with the comparison format that we've been doing for our last couple episodes. So this time we thought we would compare different technologies in Star Trek and Star Wars and try to find the things that are similar and the things that are different between the technology used in both the galaxy far, far away and the Alpha and Beta quadrants, and sometimes Gamma quadrant.
Don't forget Delta.
Oh, yeah, the Delta quadrant. Yeah, we got to have the Delta quadrant too. So, So we got the first 4 letters of the Greek alphabet represented.
You got it.
All right, so let's talk about our first pairing. Do you want to talk about blasters and phasers?
Yeah, why don't we start there? Something easy.
All right, so I'll start with the Star Wars aspect of things. So as far as blasters in Star Wars, it uses the same principles as laser weaponry. Basically, these blasters convert gas into a plasma bolt of some type. Upon being fired, the blaster bolt kind of, when it hits a target, it causes damage to the area hit. You can have burns, or you can have some gnarly flesh wounds, cut from a blaster attack. And there were different types of blasters in Star Wars. You have stun blasters, you have blaster pistols, you have rifles, you have blasters that can be reconfigured into different types of arrangements. You had ion blasters, percussive cannons, heavy repeating cannons, repeating blasters, blaster cannons. You even had some interesting, like you had Chewbacca's bowcaster, for example, with a very powerful crossbow-like blaster weapon that really did some damage above and beyond what a standard blaster pistol could do.
Didn't Han really love that?
Yeah.
And was that in The Force Awakens?
Yep. I was just going to reference Force Awakens. We get to see how powerful it truly is. I mean, you saw Kylo Ren take a crossbow bolt to the shoulder And you could tell he was visibly in pain and suffering, yet, and I think that was a big contributing factor to why Rey was able to, be as successful against him as he could, because he was in pain and Kylo Ren wasn't able to function at 100%.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Because of that blaster bolt injury. Mm-hmm. So, yeah. Okay. So I kind of didn't really put together a ton of notes on this, but we're going to use our source of Wikipedia. Okay. I'm not going to read directly from Wikipedia, but we're going to use it as talking points. So, yeah. So like I was talking with the the blaster bolt leaves a mark. It's referred to as a blaster burn. You kind of you could do all kinds of modifications to a blaster weapon. You could put a scope on it. You could put a long barrel to make it like a sniper. You could put a double barrel to be more like a shotgun. You could put together a blaster in any kind of common configuration that we have in our world today for weapons.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So that's kind of blaster technology from Star Wars in a nutshell. What do we have? How do phasers work, and how do they compare to blasters?
Well, I'm not sure. I can't remember. I know in the original series, it said in the episode Omega Glory that phasers had power packs. They didn't really say that a whole lot more in any of the other episodes. So I don't know necessarily what the power source is. I don't know if they had like some sort of crystal or something in there that, that kind of gets the beams going. Mm-hmm. But basically, phasers or Starfleet phasers anyway, are supposed to be used to try to just stun people. But obviously, Star Trek, the Federation is very pacifistic, and nobody wants to kill unless they absolutely have to. But phasers can be moved up to different levels. So there's the light stun, and then there's just regular stun, and then there's heavy stun. But then it also has the ability to be put on the kill setting to actually disintegrate somebody. Now, the stun and kill seem to be a little bit different in Star Wars. Star Wars, they have those like blue rings that come out,
right?
That stun somebody. Where the phasers, no matter what setting is, you still just see a particle stream of energy that comes out. But they can leave phaser burns, especially at close range, and it's deadly with stun as well up in close range. We saw that in Star Trek VI. When Burke and Samno were killed by Valeris. Do you remember that?
I've seen it. No, I don't remember.
So Burke and Samno were the ones who beamed aboard Chancellor Gorkon's ship and assassinated him. Mm-hmm. And so Valeris knew that she had to keep them quiet. So at one point, after Kirk and McCoy are rescued from Rora Penthe, they're walking in the corridors. A door opens up and they're dead. And you can see phaser burns on their heads. And so Valeris, what they did was they used that as a way to set up the killer to find out who the identity was, and it was Valeris. So we know those at close range, they are just as deadly as a regular phaser. Now, blasters, can they disintegrate somebody? I don't think I've ever seen that, where Starfleet phasers can.
I mean, I don't know if we've seen it. We definitely haven't seen it on screen that I can recall, but I'm not entirely sure. I don't know enough about the books and comics to know if that has ever been... I imagine that while it may not be a traditional blaster, there's probably been something in years and years of expanded universe stuff, whether it's books, comics, animated shows, where somebody was disintegrated by a blaster bolt.
Yeah.
I don't recall specific examples, no.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen anything. Heck, even lightsabers don't. Well, I mean, Obi-Wan kind of disintegrated after he got hit, but that was more of him joining the Force, right?
Yeah,
so it wasn't lightsaber.
Scenario. Yeah, and that was scenario. A lightsaber that would have taken him
exactly.
Not a blaster. So.
Right. So, yeah. So blasters they're basically, so they have the stun and kill settings. It's just, but the blasters don't seem to have that disintegration disruptor effect that Starfleet phasers and a lot of Star Trek alien weaponry has as well. Like Klingons and Romulans have disruptors. And I don't know if theirs are even considered. They have a safety, especially the Klingons. If they don't have a safety, they're like, they're going to shoot you, But yeah, a lot of the more enemies have that. Also, the Jem'Hadar, I don't know if you remember about them or not. Their rifles actually shot energy, and when it hit you, it actually left an anticoagulant in you, so you would actually bleed out, no matter what you did to stop the bleeding. So
that's pretty deadly, man.
That's yeah. Yeah, that's a freaky thought. Just being shot with a phaser is one thing, but one that's going to blow a hole in you, and then it won't clot, stop. But so a lot of the Star Trek weaponry is pretty different. It sounds like the Star Wars weaponry, basically, whether it's Imperial or Rebel or Pirate or whatever, they're blasters. Essentially.
Yeah. I mean, you have different manufacturers,
right?
And so like the Empire uses one manufacturer for their weapons, but then like smugglers, like Han Solo prefers a Blast Tech brand, kind of like your Colt or your Glock. Those are the manufacturers, but they all build their weapons based on the same technology, but they each have different brands have different looks and stylings.
Right.
But yeah, how you've got blaster rifles and blaster, and hand weapons, like, handgun style weapons. You also have phasers that come in different sizes and configurations, right? There's phase rifles. We've seen them in Star Trek.
Absolutely.
And phaser technology, for ship to ship combat is also based on the same exact technology. Yes.
Absolutely. Yes. And you can actually set the ship's phasers on stun and actually fire on a city block and actually stun everybody. I don't know if you remember if you ever watched a piece of the action from season 2 of the original series.
I don't think I've seen it yet.
Yeah, it's the one with a society that actually created their whole world based around 1930 Chicago, because a century earlier there was a book left, Chicago Mobsters of the 1920s, I think it was called, something like that. And what these people on Sigma Iosha too they copied a lot of things, so they based their whole life on that. They called it the book. Cool. Yeah. But yeah, at one point, just to show how powerful the Enterprise was, Kirk stunned an entire city block from orbit.
That's impressive. That's really cool.
Yep. So weapons in the ships can be modified. I don't know. I doubt that in Star Wars. Again,
I've never seen anything like that. And you generally don't have, in Star Wars, you generally don't have much combat from ships in orbit attacking planet surfaces, right? Unless it's the Empire, in the Death Star.
Right. Exactly. Or like when Kamino was destroyed in the Bad Batch.
Right.
By that Venator.
Right. Yep. And then you have Star Destroyers in the Battle of Jakku. You had Star Destroyers in orbit over the Battle of Jakku. So yeah, you do have planetary, or ship to planetary conflict, but it generally seems to be the Empire that starts all of it.
Pretty much, yeah. Absolutely. But you're absolutely right. So Starfleet has those handheld phasers, but you're right, they can graduate into the bigger rifles, kind of like what you would see with Star Wars. So pretty cool comparisons.
So while the technology may be different for both, they do operate on some pretty consistent principles within each universe.
Yes, I agree with you.
All right. Why don't we move on to our next pairing? This one's going to be interesting. We're going to look at the different types of droids, and I think we're going to try to compare them to the Starfleet Tricorder.
Okay.
Just because I think, while you have multiple, you have different droids that serve different purposes, a tricorder is a single device that serves multiple purposes. So I thought that was the most apt comparison for us to take a look at.
Absolutely. Oh, you know what? Can I pause for 1 second?
Yeah.
Going back to what we just talked about, I meant to say this and I forgot it. Starfleet phasers can also be put on overload to be used as another form of weapon, as like a bomb.
Right. Yeah, that's true. We have seen that on at least one occasion, if not more.
Yeah. That definitely has never been in Star Wars as far as I can tell.
I don't know if I've ever seen an overheated blaster used as a weapon. I mean, you have thermal detonators that kind of serve that purpose for Star Wars.
That's a good point.
Damage.
Yeah, that just hit me while we were talking. I'm sorry.
No, that's good. That's actually, that is a very significant difference between the two. All right, so droids and tricorders. So why don't you go first? Tell us a little bit about what the tricorder can do and the evolution of the tricorder as we've seen it on screen.
Okay, so tricorders for people, they're used by Starfleet officers to scan different environments, different items, different molecular stuff, just see if people are still how they're doing health wise. You have the regular tricorder, and then you have a medical tricorder, that they pretty much do the same stuff. essentially. Some of them come with little handheld scanners so you can scan individual environments, whether or not plants are edible or those kind of things. They started out in the 22nd century during Archer's time. They were called scanners at the time. And basically what you did is you just kind of, it was like in its own little case, and you just slid the screen up basically, and then you had that. Then you had the flip tricorders in the 23rd century in the original series era. And then by the 24th century, you had this little, it kind of looks like the size of an old cell phone, if you kind of want to think of it that way. And you open it up and it lights up, beeps, and does its thing. So knowing Star Trek, they have modified tricorders for the need of the story to do multiple things, send out warning beacons and SOSs and all that fun stuff. So I guess they can be modified to do that kind of stuff, but basically their primary function is to scan and give and transmit data to our heroes so we can see what's going on. Is the planet safe or not? So
can a tricorder be used for hacking? Like to gain entry or to override a security system, or
I'm sure they can. Like this, I do believe they have. There's so many uses of it that I can't remember off the top of my head. But yeah, I think they have been able to do that. They've also been used as power energy sources as well.
Okay. So while basically, tricorders are an all-in-one device that, depending on what the needs of the plot of the episode,
exactly,
or movie, they can be used for different purposes. But essentially, it's a very all-encompassing device that has multiple functions in a single handheld device, which is completely different from droids in Star Wars, because you essentially have droids for every individual purpose, right? So you've got R2 units that are kind of, they're mechanics, they're hackers, they have some like protective weaponry, to protect themselves. Then you've got things like you've got the gonk droids, the little gonk, the ones that just waddle along. Those are basically giant batteries. So they're used as power droids for different applications. You've got droids that are designed to load stuff on, load cargo onto ships. You've got some really, droids like BB-8, which is kind of a type of astromech droid, but not the same style as R2. But essentially, yeah, you've got a different type of droid for just about every purpose. For example, I know we're not really comparing the two, but you've got the protocol droid, which essentially is the function of a universal translator in Star Trek.
Yep, absolutely.
Right? It's just the droid speaks the languages and does the translations rather than you just being able to hear what they're saying in your native tongue through the UT.
So what do you think were the closest, like any kind of droid or device, what do you think would equal the tricorder in itself? It's just a matter of every single thing is separate, whereas the tricorder has it all. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that probably if we're going to compare any single type of droid to a tricorder, you'd probably say an astromech, right?
That's what it sounds like. Checking to see like the atmosphere is livable, breathable. Something probably edible, something to that effect. Yeah, it probably does medical. Could try to do some medical stuff,
right? Because on Dagobah in The Empire Strikes Back, R2 went out to check the swamp environment first before Luke got out.
And it also didn't that happen in Mandalorian season 3? What droid did they have? Was it R5D4? That checked the surface of Mandalore to see if it was still habitable. Okay. Yes. Makes sense.
So there you go. An astromech and medical, astromechs and tricorders are probably the most apt comparison.
Absolutely. And then for the medical tricorder, what would be 2-1B, right?
Yeah, you'd have that medical droid. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. With the the 2-1 series or whatever. I can't think of what that droid series is actually called.
Yeah, that's a good question. You looking it up?
Yes, I am actually.
I know you get inquisitive.
All right, so you've got. There we go. First, so the 2-1B, or like the medical and surgical droid, those are considered first-class droids. They're skilled in mathematical, physical, and medical sciences. So you had the JN66 analysis droid, the 2-1B surgical droid. You had the midwife droid from episode 3 that helped deliver Padme's babies. Yeah, and you've got a couple other medical type droids available.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Oh, cool. Okay. All right, so we found a nice little comparison. So again, Star Wars has all the droids seem to have certain functions. The tricorder just melds everybody into one, essentially, and it's handheld. Can't carry a droid around per se. Okay.
All right, so that was a fun little comparison, I guess.
Yeah, it was.
What do you think about moving on to our next one, which holotechnology in Star Wars and compared to holodecks and holosuites in Star Trek?
I gotcha. All right. Well, we know that actually going all the way back to the animated series, there was some form of holodeck. They called it recreation room, I think, in the animated series. And it was an episode called The Practical Joker. And there was a station that's there in the middle of the room. That's what they used to create the holographic device. We all know what the holodecks are. They have a hologrid around them, and that creates that. Basically, holographic technology in Star Trek seems to be used more for entertainment. We know about Dixon Hill and, a lot of Worf's calisthenic programs and what was it, Data doing what, Henry V or Shakespeare, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And we all know what happens in Quark's holosuites. So we know what holodecks, what they're basically used for, and they're using for training simulations as well. Like when Nog was learning before he was admitted into the academy, he had to learn how to fly a runabout. You'll see it in a season 3 episode. I forget which one at the end, but he used that for training. So that's basically it. I don't think holographic technology wasn't necessarily used for communication in the Star Trek universe. At one point, they were experimenting with it. In season 5 of Deep Space Nine, there's the episode where Eddington, he had been captured by he was still in the Maquis, and he and Cisco were battling back and forth, but they had just installed a holo projector on the bridge of the Defiant, and so that's when they started beaming like a hologram onto the bridge to talk to. That lasted a whole 2 episodes, and then it was dropped without a trace after that. Never saw it again. So that is pretty much compared to what I think you and I talked about before the show about holo technology in Star Wars. A lot of times it's used for communication. But it's like that.
Yeah.
It's like those white like holograms, either their face or their whole body, and it flickers.
It
doesn't.
Yeah. So Star Trek holotechnology is very much entertainment forward, right?
Or training.
Or training, right? Ultimately, whatever, if you can imagine it, you can have it exist in a holodeck program, right? Like you said, Picard and his Dixon Hill mysteries, right? A good way, a form of escapism, right? Cosplay to the to a very significant degree. It's really, advanced cosplay.
Absolutely. Think of Captain Proton on Voyager.
Yeah.
Or the Fairhaven crowd they had during season 6 of Voyager.
Right. Yeah, but you're right. You're right about Star Wars is primarily holograms and holotechnology is used for communication purposes, right? Everyone, when you think of a hologram, a lot of people who watch Star Wars probably immediately think of the hologram message that Princess Leia records and puts in R2-D2, which sets off the events of Star Wars, of the first Star Wars, trilogy movie from 1977. You see holograms, being projected out of droids in other episodes and other things in the series. You see in Empire Strikes Back, you have the scene where Darth Vader goes to his meditation and rehab chamber and communicates with the Emperor via floating head hologram. You've got Jedi Council. In the prequels, we see a lot of the Jedi Masters on the Council joining in via hologram. One in particular, is one of those lines that gets kind of parodied a lot. But Ki-Adi-Mundi, when he's talking about the droid attack on the Wookiees, right? That was he was in there via hologram. So primarily, yes, holograms are used in Star Wars for communication, but there's a lot of entertainment aspects as well to holotechnology in Star Wars, right? Like, going back to the original Star Wars, A New Hope, Episode 4, whatever you want to call it, you have on the Millennium Falcon, you have the holo chess match between C-3PO and Chewbacca, where we get the line that, Wookiees, or I mean, droids don't pull people's arms off when they lose, or pull people's arms out of their sockets when they lose.
Absolutely.
Right? So you've got holochess in that regard. You've got holotechnology used in card games like Sabacc. The cards, in Sabacc, the cards have holograms, and they can be changed. There are different things that you can change the value of your card. So that uses holotechnology as well. I'm not sure what other types. You had the Holo-Net, which is kind of like your broadcast television. You had the Holo-Net where you had news programs, you had soap operas, you had other entertainment. I'm sure there was like a reality show type concept. In on the Holo-Net. So people could view holograms as entertainment. In Star Wars, you could. Let's see. What other types of... I can't think of any other types of applications of holotechnology offhand.
I was thinking here, what about for tactical scenarios, tactical situations? Right.
Yes, we see the briefing room scenes in not only in, we see it in the original Star Wars, we see it we see a little bit in Empire Strikes Back, and we definitely see it in the, as they're planning the attack run on Endor, and the attack on the Death Star 2. We've seen, I swear we've seen it used in Rebels as well. Yeah. So it can be used for military purposes as planning for, a major full-scale operation.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, if you watch the episodes of the Clone Wars, they're littered with that, which makes logical sense.
For sure. Yeah.
So, but beyond that, I'm not sure if there's any other real use.
Yeah, I can't think of anything offhand. I mean, there might be something that I'm not thinking of that's it's only occurred once or twice in an obscure book or comic that I haven't read.
Right. Absolutely. Now, I think the last thing we kind of just threw in there, we were just having a personal discussion.
Yeah.
Could a Federation starship destroy the Death Star? Who would be the more destructive, force?
Yeah, yeah. I know you had proposed that before we started recording, and we kind of talked through it a little bit and found that, maybe it's not as one-sided as you might think.
Exactly.
So we kind of, offline we were discussing the differences in how phasers and torpedoes in Star Trek work versus blasters, lasers, or torpedoes in Star Wars. You find that a lot of ships in Star Wars did have shield generators, right? Much like a Starfleet vessel or other alien vessel. There's a shield generator that can absorb some damage from lasers and phase weapons, respectively, depending on the franchise. But then you've got photon torpedoes in Star Trek that can do more concussive damage, and they have the potential to blast a hole in a shield, which, in Star Wars as well, a torpedo or a missile, launched from from ships that have that capacity, they're able to go through and penetrate shields and sometimes even destroy the aggressor, the other vessel.
Absolutely.
Penetrating the shield. So,
right.
Yeah.
And that kind of leads into a discussion, like, are Starfleet phasers equivalent to Star Wars lasers? You know what I mean? That they fire on the ship. Because I know in Next Generation, there was one episode where somebody was attacking the Enterprise and they were just using lasers. And Picard's kind of smirking like, come on, really? So, but then that would be a discussion like, you'd have to see if they're equivalent to each other or, separate. I always felt that Federation ships could destroy the Death Star with quantum torpedoes and stuff like that. It might take a little bit, but I think they could definitely do it. But the Death Star can destroy planets. So all the Death Star would have to do is aim its laser at a ship and they'd be gone with the wind. So it's kind of fascinating to see like who would stand up in that situation. Plus the Death Star is the size of a moon, so it's, that could be taken into account as well, but I always had that in the back of my mind, who would beat who in that scenario.
And so are Star Wars lasers are they the same technology in the lasers that Picard was referring to in TNG, right? So Star Trek has always been based on real world science, but extrapolated to what it could potentially be in the future. Star Wars is just more Star Wars is all kind of, especially, like the space battles in Star Wars are much more like dogfights that you'd see in atmosphere. Obviously George Lucas was inspired by dogfights in like World War II, World War I, with fighter planes. That's what he built. Like he structured the battles in Star Wars around that kind of model. Where again, this is something we also talked about offline, where Starfleet and battles in the Star Trek universe are much more like a long drawn out naval battle, right? It's not going to be quick pew 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 pew, right? It's a systematic battle. There's a lot of strategy. There's a lot more strategy involved because and sometimes, like we were talking also, Star Trek phasers have the ability to be modulated or remodulated, to respond, to penetrate different frequencies, right? We see that a lot with the Borg, right? The Star Trek constantly has to remodulate their phasers to be able to do damage because of the way the Borg learn.
That's right. Borg learn and adapt. Absolutely.
Yeah. So it's. I don't know if we can pick a winner.
I don't think so either, because there are strengths and weaknesses on both ends.
Yeah.
So it's always just it's fun though, just the battle between the two franchises, just to see,
Yeah.
So
I have fun with these kinds of compare and contrast episodes, and this, the last one that we did was just way out there, but it was fun. It was definitely fun.
That's what makes it entertaining.
Yeah, for sure.
Exactly. So cool. Thank you for letting us throw that in the show.
Yeah, of course. So I think on that note, we are going to wrap things up for this episode, right?
I think so.
Okay, well, we hope you enjoyed our discussion of technology in Star Wars and Star Trek, as well as that little bonus discussion at the end there. We're going to be back with an episode in early August, so stay subscribed to our podcast feed, to Feast of Fandoms feeds and social medias, and you'll get the episodes notifications as they arrive. We will see you next month in August for more Captains Logs and Lightsabers podcast discussions. On that note, may the Force be with you.
And live long and prosper.
Good night, everybody.